Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. Today, Rich and I are going to preview every game of Wild Card Weekend, so make sure you stick around. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. I am Ray. He is Rich. We are here to talk about every wild card game this weekend, previewing it from a betting, a DFS angle, talking about props, fantasy, all of that. So we're excited to get into it. Before we do, got to ask, how we doing, Rich? How we feeling?
We're doing good, man. It's new year, and it feels like when you come for the playoffs, it's a different vibe. But having fewer games is always nice. But because there are fewer games and there are more eyeballs in these games, the worksheet still ended up being more robust. I put more into them still. You probably know
there's a giant section in the worksheet at the top of every one that just kind of goes over your general thoughts for the game, which I thought were all really good and really insightful as we were going through that. So. Yeah, no, the worksheets were large this week, but like we have to because we're coming to the end, right? Like we're running out of games, and I think there are times in the season where you're hit with another 16 game week, and you're like, man, this is never ending. But now as we get here close to the end, you're like, I don't want this to go away. I don't want the NFL off season. I don't want to have to think about where Mike McDaniels ends up as the offensive coordinator. I just want to watch some games. And so luckily we've got 6 more this week. And then obviously moving forward out of that, where do we have 4 and then 2 and then 1? Is that what we got moving forward? So looking forward to all the games we have left. And as Rich mentioned, there will be a worksheet preview for every game we have left. So what Rich does every week of the season, bar week 18, where he goes through every single game, all the fantasy relevant players, and every game gives his thoughts on, what he expects, gives interesting nuggets about usage and coverage schemes and how each team defends the run, different run schemes. All of that is available as part of those worksheets over at Sharp Football Analysis. And right now you can actually get a decent deal for Wildcard Weekend. I would even call it a good deal, a special deal for our listeners. You get all of our Wildcard Weekend betting recommendations and those worksheets from Rich Hribar just for $19.99. That's an 80% discount. We've been on a hot run at the website over the last several weeks. Last week in week 18, we really cleaned up. Now for the entire season, a $100 better is up $12,318 for following our recommendations. That's $680 per week. And again, you can get on board for just $19.99. So make sure you head over to sharp.football, check out that deal, get access to Rich's worksheets, get access to his fantasy rankings, and then also get access to our betting recommendations with props, sides, totals, all of that. So make sure you check that out. All right, let's get into the worksheet, the kind of like State of the Union, as I call it, because I thought there was some interesting stuff. And you write this intro every week for like, all right, what are we looking at this week? What are the main ideas? And you had some against the spread stats in the worksheet that I thought were interesting, especially since we have so many road favorites this week, which, it's not abnormal for us to have that many road favorites, but we do have a lot of them this week. And so you had a lot of interesting numbers in there. And I think the one that really stuck out to me is that road favorites only 9-14-1 against the spread since 2002, which is really like one of those things where you have to think about, all right, how in depth am I going to go in here? And then I also am thinking about it as well with like, this season has been so unpredictable. How many of these playoff teams that we're looking at and talking about would we have predicted to be playoff teams before the season? It's not a big number, and it certainly seems like it was a more unpredictable season in that regard than we've usually have, or at least had in recent seasons. Obviously, the Chiefs aren't here, the Ravens aren't here. There are lots of big name teams like that. The Lions aren't here, and so I look at all of that and how many road favorites. I think it's important this week to not get like too ahead of yourself and thinking what's going to happen, because I do think it's going to be one of those weeks that we see a lot of upsets. We see a lot of closer games than we expect. That Rams-Panthers game, we'll get to it. That certainly stands out to me as like, is this really this big a spread? Does this make sense? So I think it's interesting from that regard.
And when you look at this particular wild card season, it really is reflected in the spreads. I mean, only the Rams are really big favorites this week. Usually you do see some big favorites, especially since the NFL added that 7th team to the playoffs. I think that's probably the biggest. You look at those 7 seeds this year, and they're pretty tight the tight spreads and to involve those teams. And prior to this year, we had only seen one 7 seed be an underdog of less than a touchdown. And then that was the Packers. Then it was 5 points. And then now this year it's 3.5 for the Chargers. Packers, that Packers game keeps flip-flopping between like a point in each direction. So that just that you see the 7 seeds be that tightly dogs, or even sometimes the Packers being favored, really it kind of emphasizes what you kind of reinforce. And it kind of puts the season in a nutshell, right? In a nice little blanket to show you like how much parity there's been in the NFL this season. And when you look at these like fantasy contests going on right now, like it feels as wide open as it's ever felt. Like you don't even feel like really bullish, even on a team that has been like kind of, really one of the strongest teams of the past, decade, in the Buffalo Bills, right? Like it's just like, oh, like are the Bills gonna make it? Like, yeah, like Josh Allen, but it's like you could see like any of these teams win this weekend. And you look at some of these like road favorites, especially where we are. I mean, especially recently, they're just 1-5 the past 3 years straight up. So like, typically it's home teams. You were always one of the ones when I started getting into betting. I did a show with you at NBC, and you'd always like be harping on like short home dogs. Like that was like your thing. And like we have a bunch of those this week.
Yeah, and I also always have loved double-digit home dogs, and we even have one of those with the Panthers. Although I don't know how that one has been less productive as of late. I don't have the exact numbers on it, but it has. There was a time where if you got a double-digit home dog, you just bet it. Like it was 70%, you just bet it. It hasn't been that high, but it still generally has been profitable. So yeah, this is again one of those weeks, right? I think we will have some surprises. Although, like you said, all of the spreads except for that Rams game are so tight that I don't know if the Bears win, but the Packers are 1-point favorite. Is that really an upset? If the Jaguars win, but the Bills are 1-point favorite, is that really an upset? Probably, probably not. So when I'm talking about upsets, I'm just more operating. If you're building DFS lineups around this, make sure you are building a game, approaching it in different ways, because I do think that there's a large range of outcomes for many of these games. Speaking of building a lineup, let's go to Warren Sharp real quick before we get into the games, talk about our PrizePicks lineup for Wild Card Weekend.
It's time for us to build this week's PrizePicks lineup and turn $100 into $600. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports with their easy-to-use app. And now you can play $5 and get $50 instantly in lineups when you use code Warren after you download their app. All right, we have been rolling on these PrizePicks lineups. We won again last week. I think we've won 3 out of the last 4 or 4 out of the last 5. Whatever the case might be, turning $100 into $600. That's exactly what we're going to look to do here. As a quick reminder, you can enter code Warren when you download the PrizePicks app, and they will give you $50 in lineups as soon as you play your first $5 lineup. They're available in a ton of states. So let's get started here with our wild card weekend lineup over at PrizePicks. First up, we're going with Dalton Kincaid's longest reception, more than 18.5. I'm almost positive he's hit this in every single game this year except for one. It's a print it and forget it type situation with Dalton Kincaid, most typically, because he's going to be relied upon here by Josh Allen. We think that this game is a tight game, back and forth type game. The spread on the game sort of is indicative of that. And Josh Allen going on the road might need to lean into his security blanket. Obviously, Khalil Shakir is one of those, but if they're trailing in the game at all, they raise their pass rate a tiny bit here. They're going to need Dalton Kincaid to step up. He's certainly more than capable of it. This is a weakness of the Jags defense. Kincaid more than 18.5. Next up, we've got Saquon Barkley rushing attempts more than 18.5. Same number, 18.5. Let's just hit it again with Saquon's rushing attempts over. If you look at what he was doing last season, during the regular season and then into the postseason, I've got his totals here, and they ramped him up throughout the course of the back half of the regular season and then into the postseason. There were several weeks where he was averaging, week 13, week 14, week 15, he was like 19 to 23 rushing attempts. And then you got into the very end of the season where they needed him, 29 rushing attempts, 31 rushing attempts, and then into the postseason, 25, 26, and 25. The only game that he didn't have 25 plus rushing attempts in the postseason last year was against the Washington Commanders. The Eagles won that game 55 to 23. They could rest him heading into the Super Bowl just to ensure that he does not get hurt. Saquon Barkley has exceeded this number, as you can see right there on the graphic, in the last 4 games. Now, he hasn't had totals as high as 25 like he was doing in last year's postseason, but we don't necessarily need that. We just need at least 19. I think he's in a good position playing from a lead against a San Francisco 49ers defense that does struggle against the run, to be the bell cow once again for the Eagles after taking last week off and having a lot of success here. Saquon Barkley, more than 18.5. Last but not least, we rounded out with Ramondre Stevenson, longest rush, more than 10.5. As the graphic depicts, we've seen him hit this 4 straight weeks. He's working in a lot more with Travion Henderson. That timeshare is very close to being an even split. Ramondre Stevenson has averaged 5 yards per carry over the last several weeks. He is running the football really well and breaking some explosives. And the Chargers' run defense does give up some explosives from time to time. So we think Ramondre Stevenson in a game where, yes, you've got Drake May. Yes, your pass rate is a little bit high, but first playoff game of your career, do you want to have Drake May drop back if you're in a tight game or have a slight lead more than usual? Or would you rather lean on a run game if that run game is being a little bit more productive, and then get Drake May to pick and choose his spots a little bit more against a really good pass defense? I would opt for the latter as long as you're not trailing. So let's go Ramondre Stevenson, more than 10.5. The 3 of these make up our PrizePicks lineup this week, looking to turn 100 into 600. If you like this and you want to do it yourself, head on over to PrizePicks, use code Warren, or click the link in the description below, where you can get $50 in lineups instantly as soon as you place your first $5 lineup. Good luck this week.
All right, let's get to our first game here. The Rams and the Panthers. We talked about it a little bit. 46.5 point total. The Rams are minus 10.5. It looks like Devontae Adams will be back for this game. He got in a full practice on Wednesday. Again, we record this on Thursday mornings, so there's some of the injury stuff that we don't know. But we're just trying to see what we think is going to happen. Devontae Adams, it seems like he will be ready for this. It seems like Terrence Ferguson is likely to sit again. Those are, I think, probably the 2 biggest injuries we're looking at from a skill position. You mentioned this in the intro to the game. Like I said, if you head over to Sharp Football Analysis, every game has this game intro from Rich that I think is really interesting, just like a overview of what we're looking at for the game. You mentioned the game that, the Panthers won in week 13. And so you might look at this line 10.5. And obviously I have concerns about any road favorite of that many points, but I do think this line is indicative of how fluky that Panthers win was in week 13.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to pull off the double-digit, point upset, like that Week 13 game was like the blueprint of how it happens,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Like it was like to a T. Like they won the turnover battle 3-0. And all 3 of the turnovers weren't even turnovers. Like they were significant swing turnovers. Obviously, we had the direct pick 6 that Mike Jackson had. We had a tipped interception in the end zone for the Rams. Then, Stafford was strip sacked by Derek Brown on the 22-yard line when they could have kicked potentially the game tying field goal, if not went ahead with the touchdown. Also, the Carolina Panthers were 7 of 15 on third downs. That was the second most conversions on third down they had in a game this season. They also went 3 of 3 on fourth downs. 2 of those were touchdowns. They scored 3 offensive touchdowns. They were from 35, 33, and 43 yards out. They had the ball for 35 minutes of clock. It was their most significant time possession margin of the season. Like this was the blueprint. This is like how you do it. The question is, can you replicate that? Like, did they burn their one? Because when you look at like what the Panthers still allowed the Rams to do, the Rams still averaged 7.4 yards per play. That was their 4th highest in a game this season and the highest in the NFL in week 13. They only faced 5 third downs the entire game. They had 1 penalty the entire game. They still scored 4 offensive touchdowns. They didn't stop them really outside of the big turnovers. So technically they get stops, but you get what I'm saying. So but like, can you run that back? Because we've seen this happen in the playoffs before, but like they already did it once. It feels like they already used their one spade. I will say that the Panthers, they're a team I've talked about a few times over the course of the season about their defense and how like they're not like really daunting when you look at it on paper. They don't have like a huge pass rush. They don't have a lot of stars. Derek Brown and JC Horn are definitely very good players. But like outside of those two guys, you're just like, man, is this defense any good? But they've constantly given like these meta offenses, what I call like the meta offenses, the teams that like play under center, run a lot of play action passes. They're combating like the current defensive meta. They've given like all those teams like a decent amount of trouble. Like you look at Brock Purdy on the Monday night game, they shut him down. Sam Darnold just a couple weeks ago was really ineffective. Jordan Love had 0 touchdowns and interception against them. They pulled off that upset, and they were able to pull off this upset against the Rams. They're the best team against the play action pass this year, and they're really good. They're one of the highest rated teams that disguise coverages pre and post snap. And even in that first game, Stafford ran his highest rate of play action in that game, and using play action, he wasn't effective in that game. 5.2 yards per pass attempt on play action passes, because what you do on play action passes is you turn your back to the defense, right? Inherently. And that window changes. This is what the Panthers do. But on non-play action passes, when you just drop back against them, they go from first to 29th in yards per pass attempt. And in that game, Stafford averaged 13.3 yards per pass attempt on his non-play action passes. So I'm very curious to see if Sean McVay, who obviously, Avero worked for him with the Rams. And interesting enough, Raheem Morris gave Sean McVay some trouble too, another familiar head coach with him. So I'm curious to see what McVay pulls, because he's an adjuster. Like, I'm curious what he pulls from that matchup. And I wonder if we don't see as much heavy 13 personnel, if we see more 11 personnel. They did run a lot of 11 personnel in the first game, but like more traditional dropbacks from Stafford, and you don't see as much like emphasis on the play action, because that would be an area where I would say the Rams want to remove that from the playbook a little bit here, because that's where the Panthers are more vulnerable and they can exploit them.
Yeah, I mean, that's my big question heading into this game, especially getting Devontae Adams back. And, they probably won't have Ferguson, but they have Higbee now. And so that, you have options there, right? But do we see more of that 11? Do we see them run more of like what we imagine what the Rams offense was like 2 years ago, right? Are we seeing them change some of what they do against this defense? Because like you said, it does seem like they figured out how to limit what offenses are doing under center and play action, having turned their back on the defense, but they're also just not as talented as other defenses in the league. And so if you just line it up in shotgun and throw Devontae Adams and Puka at them, and then whatever tight end you have out there, Higbee or Parkinson or whomever, right? Then can you just beat them and like just line up and beat them? Is this a line up and beat them situation that they have? And also it seems like they should have success in the running game. We don't know still, I guess, exactly what the split will be between Kyren Williams and Blake Corum. I think it's fair to say that Corum has earned his touches and that we will see the split continue. Although you could see a world in which they trust Kyren more, that, they've been saving him for the playoffs, that we see the split go the other way. It'll be interesting to see what happens here with Corum. But either way, whoever's running that football, we would expect them to have success in this matchup. But if you're able to just line up and run, and you're able to, just line up and throw, then you don't have to use some of this other stuff that has made offenses, the best offenses, better this year, then that makes life really a lot easier. So it'll be interesting to see if that's kind of the approach they take.
Yeah, and one of the things to take in context of that first matchup is, like I talked about, that time possession margin. Even though the Panthers scored all those long touchdowns, they even had a pick six. Like I said, they controlled the clock by just kind of like leaning on their run game that wasn't like super effective in that game, but they had everything go right. Now, what if the game script, it doesn't necessarily has to flip in totality where it's just complete inverse of what it was, but what if this 10-point spread is more in line with indicative how the game plays out, and we see just the Rams in a better script to run the football more? Because in that first matchup, their running backs ran the ball 20 times for 153 yards. And because what they're good at in terms of like the concepts of runs they run, like Kyren Williams is number 1 in the NFL in rate of man concept runs. Blake Corum's 3rd. And Carolina this year against man gap runs, 5.8 yards per carry to running backs. It's 30th in the league. They have a lot of first down or touchdown, 35% of those runs, and almost 3 yards before contact on those runs. So I actually think that this isn't like a Sean McVay, like needs to be like less Sean McVay here. And just like you say, let's just line up and play football against these guys. Like we don't need to overly scheme things. I think they should actually simplify the game plan here, lean on these running backs, and then just have their stars, win the game that way.
As for the other running game, it's been Carolina has really not had success. They did have, as you mentioned, success running in this game a little bit, but it was all Chuba Hubbard. It wasn't even Rico Dowdle, who we've seen Rico Dowdle get more of that early down work as we've moved into, second half of the season. But it does seem like the Panthers are going to be healthier on the offensive line, probably get Robert Hunt back, probably get Chandler Zavala back. I wonder if that plays a role, because we have seen this team and we've seen Rico Dowdle be successful as a runner this season. So I wonder, and I mean, they didn't have Hunt when Rico Dowdle was going off. Hunt only played 2 games, right? Week 1 and 2, I believe, is all he played. So but is there something getting these guys back that they can find some success as a rushing offense? And if they are able to find that success, does that change kind of what ends up happening? Can they slow the game down and have enough success? I think that's going to be a factor here as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what they're going to want to do, right? Like when you're this big double-digit dog, like you're trying to create just in a game where you're in a position to win those high variance plays.
Yeah.
I mean, Carolina running backs though have really struggled since week 10. They're only ahead of the Raiders in success rate, and that's largely been Dowdle. Remember, this was the game where we kind of questioned if it was going to flip and it was going to be like a hot hand situation. Because these running backs combined for 203 yards when these teams met in week 13. Now, granted, they had 39 touches. Remember, I can keep in mind that big time possession disparity that we had. Like getting 40 touches out of this backfield is probably not going to happen again. But that's how they were able to get the Dowdle still only averaged 3.2 yards per carry in that game. He wasn't that effective. Hubbard had one of his best games of the year, though. In that game, he was just under 5 yards per carry. He had the 41 yards receiving, that 35-yard touchdown on the opening drive of the game they had them. And we thought it was going to be a split moving forward, but in the 4 games since that matchup, Dowdle is still out touch Hubbard 54-30, despite Dowdle not being good still over that stretch. Hubbard still has single-digit touches the past month. They kind of told us it was going to be a hot hand, but they've not gone. They've away from the cold hand. So it's really hard to kind of just to guess, will they use Hubbard more? They should, I believe. But, if Zavala and Robert Hunt are able to add some more efficiency to this running game, that's what they're going to want to do. Dave Canales wants to run the football. We've talked about it a few times with Bryce Young and just their pass rate over an expectation. I just don't believe that he's going to want Bryce Young dropping back a ton in this game. But the start of this game is just going to be so critical and how Hunt can impact that game, or if Dowdle's running with any efficiency.
Yeah, and even if they aren't throwing a lot, we got to get Tedero McMillan involved more. And as always, it's Tommy Tremble season, as I said last week. So we're into that. All right, let's move on. There's much more about that game and all the games we're talking about at Sharp Football Analysis. Go and check that out in the worksheet for sure. All right, let's move on and talk about Green Bay and Chicago, 45.5 point total. Like Rich said, this is bouncing around pick'em. When I looked at it, it was Packers -1, but it's been bouncing around. So we'll see. We'll see where it is. This game is interesting because I would say in totality, the Packers have dominated this matchup this season, but the season series is 1-1. And if you look at the point differential, it's really close, but also the Bears were losing 21-11 late in the third quarter of the first game. They were losing 13-3 at a game that Jordan Love left early at the end of the third quarter in the second game. And some fourth quarter, magic in that second game is what, and overtime, what led to them winning. And so you look at that and you go, well, the Packers are a better team. They've proven they were the better team, even if they didn't win that second game. But also, this is just kind of what the Bears do. And they've been doing it all year. So is that just what we're going to see happen again? It's just a fascinating matchup from that perspective.
It is a tough way to live, though. And we've seen kind of the past 2 weeks, even going back to the first Packers game, some of that magic, it's tough to always lean on that, right? Yeah. And like I said, put yourself in a position to where you need a high variance play. Sometimes that variance goes the other way. And that's kind of happened a little bit with, the Bears and the 49ers game, not really managing the clock well and having more downs in that final possession. Last week, they weren't able to pull it out. And like I said, that first Packers game. Now, the second Packers game, they used all the plays. they dialed all the fluky stuff that kind of happened. But this has been, like you said, the Bears all year. They're second in the league in points per drive in the fourth quarter, and quarters 1 through 3, they're 17th. It takes them a while to get going. They're very inconsistent offensively. One of the big things, I think, the story of this game, not only is Jordan Love, coming back in this game, Josh Jacobs coming in that game, but I really think the most critical piece coming back for the Packers is Zach Tom. Zach Tom's imprint on Jordan Love and on the run game is, like I said, the thing that moves the needle for me when I was writing up this game. I mean, Jordan Love has been one of the most sensitive quarterbacks to pressure in the NFL. The other quarterback is on the other side of this game too. But Love's pressure rate dropped 7% when Zach Tom's on the field compared to when he's out. And they've had other linemen injured out too. But his interception rate gets cut in half. His sack rate gets cut in half. And then when you look at the impact, with Josh Jacobs, when Zach Tom's on the field, he goes up from 3.6 yards a carry to 4.2. His explosive run rate goes up like 4%. So having Zach Tom in this matchup, who was in the first matchup, is, I believe, one of the most critical pieces here, outside of, obviously getting your quarterback back, because, getting Jordan Love back is a huge deal as well. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm happy for Malik Willis that, like, he's going to have, like, this resurgence of his career, but, like, we did this a little bit with Mac Jones, how he's able to keep things afloat, but, like, Jordan Love is a supremely better quarterback than Malik Willis.
On Josh Jacobs, you mentioned him. He said he's healthier than he's been in, like, 6 weeks. We'll obviously have to see. Lots of players say stuff like that. But if that's the case, I assume we would get a lot more of, like, back to Josh Jacobs being, like, the featured back rather than what we've seen, which is a lot of Emmanuel Wilson getting involved. Emmanuel Wilson's done fine. So, I guess not so much last week, but previously to that, when they were actually trying to score points,
when they were trying to play football.
Yeah, exactly. Emmanuel Wilson has been doing fine, but I assume we're going to get more of a Josh Jacobs workhorse game back, if that's actually the case, which that'll be interesting to see, like you said, with Zach Tom. As for the receivers, though, I mean, it's Christian Watson, and are we trusting anything else here with these receivers?
Very hard. It's and we've seen this really kind of be a theme across the NFL this year, right? Like, we were kind of in the back channels this year, talking about some stuff with, wide receiver one-ups, and it really feels to me, and there's a few teams in this playoffs that we'll talk about too, outside of the Packers, that we have more of this where we have a lead wide receiver that we want to play, and then we're going to use a bunch of guys at the position. And it feels like this era of the NFL is doing that more than ever, and the Packers kind of have that, right? Especially if Dontavian Wicks plays in this game. Like, we'll probably see Dobbs, Wicks, Jaden Reed all kind of be involved. Watson's been kind of the one guy you can lean on and say, like, he's been their big play guy. He's been the target earner. Since he's come back, he's actually been he's been the wide receiver 13 in air yard share. He's the wide receiver 9 in routes run, yards per out run over that span. And then the rest of the guys have all just kind of rotated in. Even Romeo Doubs, we used to be able to count on Doubs as being like, well, he'll be out there because he's involved in the run game. But even his snaps have come way down, and he's been caught in, like, this cycle of rotating guys in and out as well. So it is a sum of parts. It makes it really tough for, like, this Saturday DFS slate, right? When you look at, because we didn't even got into the Bears wide receivers.
Yeah.
Christian Watson, you feel really bullish on, and you feel good about Puka and Devontae Adams. And then, like, Carolina, you have to take a step of faith because of the quarterback situation. Will they involve Tyrone McMillan? Is it even a good matchup? Do they score enough points? And, like, the Packers just have this rotation of guys, and the Bears are probably going to have a rotation of guys. So the Saturday only slate at wide receiver feels like you're just going to see a lot of the gamers make the easy clicks and just pick Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Christian Watson, right? Like, I think you're just going to see a lot of teams built out like that, because you have no trouble leaving salary on the table on many of these slates this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I want to get your thoughts on the slate just in general, but I also want to hit those Chicago wide receivers real quick, because it seems like we're getting Rome Odunze back. He said he's going to play. And so that does complicate the situation even more. We already weren't comfortable with DJ Moore, right? And kind of the up and down production. We do like what happens when Luther Burden is on the field. He gets targets generally when he's on the field, and he has production, but are we going to get him on the field as much? We've seen Colston Loveland obviously step up in recent weeks and at the tail end here of his rookie season. Does that change when we get Odunze back? And if we get Odunze back, does he play enough, and is he getting enough targets? Because that was an issue even before he was hurt and left. And so, yeah, you're right. Like, even though we're getting Odunze back here, it just kind of creates more headaches. If Odunze's not playing, I think you feel pretty comfortable with Luther Burden based on kind of what we've experienced when he's on the field. But now you're like, what am I doing with this receiving core?
Right. And I think they really have settled into kind of, playing 12 personnel, but it's like kind of like a Fugazi 12, because Colston Loveland can do so many things now. Like, he's really kind of ramped up as the season's gone on. So I think they're just really comfortable having Colston Loveland be kind of that. He can be that Y that can flex out, so it's like, I don't think Loveland's going to lose snaps. So if Odunze, kind of like, if you read between the lines, he kind of suggested, like, if this wasn't a playoff game, maybe I wouldn't be playing. So my, like, ears kind of perked up, and I'm like, oh, this guy might only be in like high leverage spots. He did lead the team in end zone targets before he was hurt. So, like, I think that's kind of what we're going to see. He's going to have limited snaps, play high leverage spots. We're probably going to see Loveland play a lot, Cole Kmet play, and then you're going to see like Burden get mixed in as well. DJ Moore has played a lot of snaps. He's been like kind of like the one guy that you can count on always being out there. He did injure his foot, I believe, at the end of last week. And so we'll see kind of follow that at the end of the week. But it does just create kind of a mess, though. And then when you look at kind of like the way Caleb Williams even played in both these games, it's not like we're spreading out like 350 passing yards and you feel good about it, right? Yeah. Like it's, you've got this messy situation, against this opponent and this quarterback that just like generally struggled for the first 3 quarters of both of these games. So, if it's going to be a situation where it's like a sum of parts, and then you got a quarterback throwing for maybe 200 to 250 yards as opposed to, like flirting with 300 plus, like it just kind of limits the ceiling of all of these guys from a fantasy perspective.
And I think that Caleb Williams discussion is so interesting because if you went back in time and told somebody that the Bears were going to win the division and be the number 2 seed, then you would have thought that Caleb Williams had a fantastic sophomore season, and he's had a better sophomore season for sure. But there have been, these accuracy issues just continue in which he's missing throws. He's not consistently accurate. I would say he's been better of late. I think he's playing his best football in the last several weeks. And so that is, that's definitely promising, but you'd still have these concerns about Caleb Williams. And it's interesting. The Bears were able to do this and Ben Johnson was able to get here. And we talked about, some of the turnover stuff and some of the late game comebacks. And there's definitely some flukiness involved in this, but the fact that they were able to do it, and I don't even think got the season out of Caleb Williams that maybe the Bears brass was hoping for, is interesting, especially as we head into this playoff game and what are they able to do. And now this high leverage situation.
It's going to be interesting too, I think, moving forward, the conversation with Caleb Williams into next year, because obviously you would assume that there's more projection. This really reminds me of Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah.
Remember Trevor Lawrence's rookie year into his second year, and he improved under Doug Peterson, but still had like flaws. Like it's like, oh, well, like under the hood, but like, well, he got better in year 2. He's just going to continue to progress, right? So I'm thinking it's going to be really interesting to see Caleb Williams year 3, because he's, we took the step forward. Ben Johnson, had him playing under center more play action, but like we still saw a lot of the he misses a lot of the free ones. Caleb Williams still makes like 5 to 6 plays a game where like, you're like, yeah, I get it, right? Remember, Trevor Lawrence kept doing that too. And you stayed on the hook. And now we're here now with Trevor Lawrence. We've come full circle again. But it really reminds me of
I was going to say, wait for 2028 Caleb Williams. That's what 2028 Caleb Williams is.
But so I'm going to be very curious to see like the next level of progression from Caleb Williams, because I mean, it's still like he still had a 14.6 inaccurate throw rate. That was the worst among 33 passers that qualified for a league's quarterback rating. And again, with Caleb, like I said, he'll make plays that you're like wowed by, and then there's just throws where you're just like, oh man, you got to hit that. Like you got to have that throw, right? And that's kind of in both of these games, and these teams played early in the year, early games, like just the consistency factor is what we're, again, keep going back to that. What I thought was really interesting though is that, remember in the first game, Micah Parsons played, and they lost Micah Parsons in the Denver game, and Micah Parsons didn't play in the second game, and they actually blitzed at a lower rate, because the blitz rate's gone up a little bit without Micah Parsons. You would expect that. You're trying to compensate for one of the league's best pass rushers, but Green Bay still pressured him, at a higher rate in week 16 than they did with Micah Parsons in week 14 with a lower blitz rate. And like I talked about with Jordan Love, like Caleb has been one of the more sensitive guys, to pressure this season. So very intriguing kind of cat and mouse game in this game. The playoff matchups, I think in general, like they're full of like really intriguing matchups. A lot of strength on strength stuff. And this one, obviously you're getting the rubber match. So it's like you get the three-peat for the game, but yeah.
So you kind of hit on it a little bit already, but I just wanted to get for that Saturday slate. It's still early, right? In the week, Thursday morning, but any overall strategy thoughts that you have for that Saturday slate, just kind of how you're approaching things in general?
I think 2 ways I want to play it. I want to play it through the Rams running backs, like we talked about, just because I think a lot of people are going to be, easy click Puka Nacua, right, at wide receiver, because we have a bunch of wide receiver, like a lot of wide receiver mess. So I do want to do some Jordan Love stuff. Jordan Love was really good in the first match between these games. The Bears too, we didn't really talk about just like how high variance their defense has been this year. And Jordan Love's a very high variance quarterback. So I like the idea of like doing something like Jordan Love, Christian Watson, maybe you add a Jaden Reed or something like that, and doing both Rams running backs, and then also building a Rams passing stack too as well. Because I do think when you look at the Rams offense in totality, they're just in the best spot on the Saturday slate. But I also think that the Packers are in a really good spot as well. So I'll probably do like Ram stuff with Josh Jacobs, and then Packer stuff with the running backs on the Ram side to kind of like cover those bases.
Yeah, and I think to your point, with how much we would expect conformity with the wide receivers people want to play, that allows you to build around things you feel very comfortable in, as in the Rams passing attack, right? Or, however you want to build, while then also throwing in those wild card eye upside wide receivers, throwing in a Jaden Reed, throwing in a Dunze, right? Throwing in a Burden, although Burden probably still going to be popular, I would imagine, right? So throwing in DJ Moore, throwing in a Jalen Coker, right? Things like that where we have a little more upside. That's I think that's going to be interesting and kind of building around that. Or going
not going to be easy, but Loveland is probably the guy like you probably have to fade in large field.
Yeah.
Because of this tight end slate, like he's just going to be probably the most highest owned player.
Well, that's why it's Tommy Tremble season.
Yeah, I mean, because when you think about, we talk about like you have to pick your favorite Rams guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's messy. You've got the Panthers, so you said Tommy Tremble, and then you've got Luke Musgrave. Yeah, like Pete Loveland's just gonna be auto. Like he's just gonna be ownership's just gonna be steered to him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, remember that you can get access to every worksheet. So those 2 games, all the 4 games are going to cover moving forward. Get access to all of those over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Also, as well as all of our betting recommendations for just $19.99. Head over to sharp.football and take advantage of this deal. Let's do Bills and Jags, 51.5 point total. The Bills are -1, at least when I checked. And this is a very interesting game. Like, we keep going through these games, and I do think we're getting a lot of really interesting matchups, because I think at this point, it's hard to argue that the Jaguars don't have a better roster and are playing better than the Bills right now. But the Bills have Josh Allen, who is very clearly the best quarterback left in the tournament. I would say at least his peak is the best quarterback left in the playoffs. And so you're like, all right, what am I putting my stock in here? Do I have my stock in Josh Allen going full Allen Superman mode? He had a full practice on Wednesday. Are we accepting that his foot is healthier than it has been, and we're going to get like the full Josh Allen experience? Or can the Jaguars, as hot as they are, keep it going? And I think it's a difficult question to answer, because I could definitely see both sides of that argument.
100%. And what's really, I think, interesting in this game is kind of the strength on strength stuff that we kind of hinted at. I mean, the Bills are 28th in pass rate over expectation. I guess they would be under expectation in this stance. We know they want to lean on that offensive line. They want to lean on James Cook. They want to lean on that run game. But the Jaguars haven't allowed any running back to rush for 80 yards in a game against them season, because they are so good against the run, and because they inherently are with the lead. I mean, teams have thrown the ball 4.4% over expectations against them. It's the second highest rate in the NFL. So whenever I see a situation where it's like, oh, wow, Bills are on the road against an offense that can push them, and it's a team that also might push them to throw the ball more, I'm like, oh, like we're inherently like setting up a game environment for like, the air quotes, the super Josh to come out. And, super Josh has typically been kind of in these playoff games anyways, 13 career playoff games, 26.4 fantasy points per game. He's only been below 20 fantasy points in 3 career playoff games, below 17 points in 1. Like, the guy doesn't drop eggs in the playoffs. He's hyper efficient. He runs more. We'll see about the foot. But like, and then you look at the Jaguars, like this is the side of the Jaguars offense I just believe in at this point. Like, I am like them going to Denver and scoring 34 points. I'm like, Liam Cohen, proof of concept. I believe the defense still, I have questions about the Jaguars defense of how great they are. It's another team that they don't get like a significant amount of pass rush, like the middle of the league. They don't get a lot of sacks. They have injuries in the back end with Jordan Lewis being out now. And then you look at, since the week 8 bye, they faced Geno Smith, Davis Mills. They did face Justin Herbert, Jacoby Brissett, Cam Ward, Riley Leonard, Brady Cook, Bo Nix, Phillip Rivers, and then Brandon Allen. Like, this is not a very daunting rogues gallery of opponents. And before the bye, they were giving up 27 fantasy points to Matthew Stafford, 20 points to Sam Darnold, 27 points to Patrick Mahomes, 18 points to Brock Purdy. I still see this as a spot where, like, you're really poking. Like, it feels like the beast is like going to be ready to be uncaged early on. Like, remember that the Patriots game? Like, the Patriots went up 24-7. You're like, oh, here it comes. Like, it feels like very early on, like we're going to be in Josh Allen mode because of the structure of the Jaguars defense and this game being on the road against an offense that can produce points.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why this is the highest total of the weekend, and I don't think anybody's really pushing back against it. You mentioned James Cook and how it's not a great matchup for him. I am interested in what we get, though. Ty Johnson was a DNP on Wednesday, and if Ty Johnson misses this game, do we get James Cook used more as a receiver, which has been that kind of missing piece for him a little bit this year? And if we're getting him used there, that kind of limits those concerns you have with the with the games with the matchup, and then also opens up this idea of just putting Cook and Allen together in a DFS lineup and hoping that Cook gets 4 catches instead of 1, right? And so that's an interesting situation as well. So that'll be something to watch. Are there any Bills, and we've done this now for several teams, as you mentioned, it's kind of a theme here. Are there any Bills pass catchers that we have any confidence in whatsoever?
I really like the tight ends here. It kind of reminds me of the Cincinnati game where, all the tight ends kind of combined for a really good game, 11 catches for 137 yards in that game. Jacksonville's 29th in receptions, a lot of the tight ends. They're also 18th in touchdown rate. So I feel like both Kincaid and Dawson Knox, who's come on the back half of the year, is clearly Kincaid's like not 100%, but is still like efficient enough. But now that Knox is like playing more, he's been involved. And then I do have a little bit of intrigue in Khalil Shakir too, especially. I don't want to overlook him just because of this injury to Jordan Lewis. Because if we're going to have a bunch of dropbacks, right? If we're projecting the Bills to be pushed into a game where they either have to throw more or they're in just a game environment where they have to throw more, we know that Khalil Shakir is the guy to bet on. And this injury to Jordan Lewis, who was their primary slot guy when they went to nickel, has shaken up their secondary. Jerry and Jones has now moved into the slot, and then Monteric Brown has moved outside. So just want to keep I'm more bullish on the tight ends, but I don't want to ignore Shakir for the season-long metrics, because the season-long metrics suggest the Jaguars have been awesome against slot receivers. But this injury to Jordan Lewis really kind of throws this kind of in a different state that we just don't really know throughout the start of the playoffs here.
You mentioned believing in Trevor Lawrence, and I fell into it. I can't remember how long ago. It was week 13. I was like, I just don't believe that this is real on Trevor Lawrence, and I was dead wrong. Everything has been, what's really fun watching this team is that the middle of the field is just open. Like the intermediate middle of the field is always open. Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers make at least one big catch, and then coming across the middle of the field on a deep cross, whatever, and they just make big plays. It's like clockwork. This passing game is working so well. Trevor Lawrence looks comfortable and is obviously playing as well as he's played in his career. And you made some points that I thought were interesting that I just hadn't occurred to me. The Bills' run defense has been a lot better as of late. It's not been that Trayvon Henderson game, I guess, colored it in my mind, their recent success. But as you mentioned, that was a couple runs. Otherwise, they've been good. Travis Etienne hasn't been able to run for the back half of the season anyway. Yeah, this sets up for a lot of Trevor Lawrence, especially if we're getting, either if we get the Jaguars jumping out early against this defense, I think they should have success against, and it doesn't seem like we'll have Maxwell Hairston this week for the Bills, or if it's them having to chase a Super Josh game. I still think just Trevor Lawrence is going to have success in this situation, and what a time to be alive that I would have confidence in Trevor Lawrence in the playoffs, but here we are.
I mean, like I said, that Denver game was kind of, because I know a lot of people pick apart the Jaguars back half of the schedule, and we had questions even when we talked about the game going into Denver, and it was just this is the test. And not only did they pass that test, dude, they destroyed the Broncos. Yeah. They put up 34 points in Mile High. And this team has been really predicated on leaning on the pass. As I said, Liam Cohen is really has a team. That's where Travis Etienne's at least made an impact, is he can still has an out as a receiver, but they just haven't been an effective running team the back half of the year. Actually, since week 9, they're third in the NFL in rate of pass plays for 10 or more yards, but that's over that same span. Travis Etienne, 3.6 yards per carry. That's 24th out of 32 running backs, 100 or more attempts. He's 30th on that list of 32 running backs in success rate. He's dead last in stuff rate. So it's really kind of moved him into leaning on Trevor Lawrence more. Obviously, addition to Jacoby Myers allows them to have the receivers and roles that they want. And then listen, your guy, Parker Washington, this guy just continues to make plays.
What's his name? Sorry, what's his name?
Yeah, Parker Washington.
Penn State legend.
Parker Washington. I'm sorry. Yeah, Penn State legend Parker Washington. But yeah, because as the sample continues to flesh out, where all three of these guys available, because it was kind of one of those things. It's all right, if he's gonna be the primary slot receiver, and they still have Jacoby Myers, still have Brian Thomas, is this thing where it's this fizzles out now? And that's actually the opposite. What's happened is that he's just gotten stronger. It's like he's upped his game. It's like vitamins for him. Like Jacoby Myers and Brian Thomas drawing attention has made Parker Washington even more electric. We now have 106 routes now where all three guys have been on the field together. He has a 31% target share and over 3 yards per out run on those plays. So yeah, Parker Washington making explosive plays in the pass game as well. Like I said, I think I'm more confident in receivers here because Matt Milano is back to playing really good football. So maybe he isolates Brenton Strange. Bill's been really good against tight ends anyways, but Matt Milano's been back to playing good football. So I think it is going to be more the receivers though in this game, like a Jacoby Myers, Parker Washington. Maybe we get a big play from Brian Thomas.
Next up, we have 49ers at the Eagles, 44.5 point total. Eagles 4.5 point favorites. And I'm really worried about this game because you and I are very aligned on this game. And we had, even before we talked about it yesterday, we had the exact same thought, which is, isn't this just the Seattle game again for the 49ers, which by the way, they should have lost handily and the Seahawks kind of allowed them to stick around in that game. The Eagles could do that. The Eagles have done that all year. That is kind of what the Eagles have done this season, which is why their fan base is so frustrated with this team that is obviously one of the most talented teams in the league, but hasn't probably played up to where they should be. But if you look at everything for this matchup, it looks a lot like that Seahawks game, and the 49ers were not in that game to the way that the score would suggest. I think we're going to get a very similar thing happening this week. I really like the Eagles, but again, this is what the Eagles do. And so that does take away some of the confidence I would have otherwise in this spot.
I mean, you look at the 49ers, they've basically played two styles of football a year. Either they just try to score more points than the opponent. Obviously, you have to score more points to win the game, but like win a shootout.
Thanks,
like,
John.
Yeah. Or they win like these ugly games, right? And they almost got Seattle to like not capitalize on their opportunities and be in that ugly game. Remember it was 13-3 and they had the ball like at the 10-yard line when McCaffrey had the pass a little bit behind him, and then it would turn into an interception that basically iced the game. Yeah. But that point of the game, like Seattle was squandered a bunch of first half opportunities to be up like 20 points that game. So Philadelphia is definitely capable of not capitalizing on opportunities. And they're also willing to just like, if you don't push the Eagles, like they'll keep being boring. Now, I do think that they're going to have success being boring in this game. But when you look at it from the 49ers side, it's like, how did they push the Eagles out of that? And that's where I think you have to tell yourself a story. And it's hard to tell yourself that story, especially if Trent Williams and Ricky Pearsall are not going to play in this game. Whereas at the time we're recording this, are very questionable to play in this game. Since Brock Purdy returned, he has a 50% success rate against the Cardinals, Tennessee, Indianapolis, Chicago. All matchups that we've been picking on the back half of the year. But against Carolina, 43.8% success rate, 40% against Cleveland, 33.3% against Seattle. Like when they run into defenses that can actually throw a wrench into them scoring 35 points, because that's kind of what they need to do with the state of their defense right now. They just have a hard time, winning these types of games or being like a really highly effective game. Like they need it to be like the Carolina Cleveland games, right? And like that's how the outcome has to come. So, but who are you projecting to win in this matchup? It's not a good matchup for Christian McCaffrey, especially if Trent Williams doesn't play. All of McCaffrey's efficient rushing games have come in objectifiably like Helen Keller saw these spots coming. Giants, Falcons, Colts, Bears. The only other team he's rushed for more than 4.2 yards per carry against this season was the Arizona Cardinals in week 11, a team that we also picked on the back half of the year. Eagles are the best team in the NFL against tight ends. They have been for multiple years. Zach Bond's been incredible. How he actually, paid him, like didn't let him out of the building. So can George Kittle get over and have a ceiling week? What wide receiver wins in this matchup? Like Jawan Jennings, one has just been living on touchdown dependency anyways. He's only averaged 47.6 yards per game over his past 9 games. Is he going to line up and beat Quinyon Mitchell a bunch? I'm not buying that. So how do the 49ers generate enough explosives or enough ceiling potential here to drive this into a game state that pushes the Eagles? It really feels like this is a game where the Eagles are going to be able to come out. They don't even have to be hyper efficient, but they can just find success because this 49ers defense is just so banged up and win this game like something like, 20-10 or 20-13 or 23-30, something in that ballpark. And I honestly think that even from a DFS perspective, when you look at the Sunday slate, that because of the state of the 49ers in this matchup, like you might not even get ceiling week potential out of the Eagles offense either, because it might not just drive the game state enough.
The one guy that I would push back on that against is Saquon Barkley, but we have seen Saquon Barkley in matchups, not really good matchups, not hit what we would expect out of Saquon Barkley. And you wrote it in the worksheet. And I thought it was like, this is the most, I don't even remember what his final season stat line was, but it's like the most disappointing, whatever, 1,500 yard and 9 touchdown running back season that we've ever seen, because of the expectations obviously coming off last season. But this is a great matchup for Saquon Barkley. If they get back Lane Johnson with if the 49ers offense struggles, which you and I, expect it to do, but obviously they're coached by Kyle Shanahan and they have good players. So they could certainly the Eagles are really good against tight ends, but George Kittle is not a typical tight end, right? Like that's kind of the conversation here. But so it could certainly happen. But if we were playing this game out 1,000 times, I think the majority of the times the 49ers offense is going to struggle. The Eagles, we know, are not going to try to run away from teams. It's just not what they've done. That probably means if that game state, the most likely game state, plays out, that probably means we get a lot of Saquon Barkley against the defense he should be able to exploit with his best offensive linemen and other offensive linemen around him as well, with Jurgens and Dickerson getting healthy. And if you wanted to tell me who's going to break the Sunday slate, Saquon Barkley's the answer, I think. That's the guy, I think, because we are going to have lowered expectations for this game. And I think that we could just get a vintage kind of Saquon game here in this matchup and with what we expect the game state to be. So that would be my one pushback spot. And maybe we get Jalen Hurts running more. Maybe we get a tush push. There are options, certainly, for the Eagles. But I agree with you in principle that are we going to get the run out for this game that we need to really get those ceiling outcomes for those guys?
Yeah, and there's not a matchup on the Eagles that you can point to and that's not great. It really isn't. Maybe you can pull a little bit on AJ Brown, but because he may see Deommodore Lamar, but if you want AJ Brown in one-on-one situations, so so I'm not running away from I'm not be oh, we're gonna run away from AJ Brown because of Deommodore Lamar. It's just one of those things. Did they get pushed enough? Because if the Eagles are if you're gonna willingly let the Eagles win a game where they throw 22 passes, they want to hold their please let us do that.
They have won, and I know this is not everybody knows this stat now, but they've won 2 games this year in which Jalen Hurts did not complete a second half pass, and I don't think they were too upset about it. So that's where we are with the Eagles. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, one more game here on Sunday. We've got the Chargers at the Patriots, 46 point total. Patriots -3.5. I think the question for this game, just the big overarching question, and there are interesting matchups really on either side, especially this Chargers defense, which with their ability to limit big plays against Drake May, who's obviously had a great season, but had a lot of success throwing down the field. So there's a lot of interesting things here. But I think ultimately the question for this game is, can the Chargers offense do enough with the issues they have up front? Or can the defense ugly it up enough, I guess, with Drake May, that they're able to stay in this game? Because ultimately, I think that's what has to happen for this to remain a close game.
Right.
Just because I love Justin Herbert, as all Twitter football people do, right? And I think Justin Herbert's really good, but ultimately, that offense, we know what that offense is with the issues they have up front. And they're probably not going to have a Marion Hampton. The Patriots are going to have, they already have Milton Williams back. They're probably going to have Robert Spillane back, which I think is a underreported storyline for this Patriots defense, so that we're going to see that Patriots run defense of the early season that you were legitimately scared of. I think that we're going to see that run defense back. And you kind of put all that together and you go, I don't know where it is. I don't know where it's coming for the Chargers. Could it? Absolutely. This is the NFL. That's what happens. It's a young quarterback going up against a Jesse Minter defense who we have a lot of respect for. But I don't know where the points are coming for the Chargers, and I guess that's my big question.
Right. It's going to have to be, you're going to have an inexperienced Drake May kind of run against one of the probably the best defense that he's faced all year. It's predicated on slowing down big explosive pass plays, which is, obviously the Patriots, they're fourth in rate of plays that gain 10 or more yards. They lead the NFL in rate of plays that gain 20 or more yards. They lead the NFL in plays that have gained 50 or more yards this season. And because if this turns into a track meet, the Chargers just don't have the ammo to keep up. We've seen since week 10, the Joe Alt injury, Chargers are 27th in yards per play. They're 27th in success rate. They're 29th in explosive play rate. They're 27th in points per drive. If they have to score points in a game, it's just not in there. I just don't think it's in their DNA right now to be able to do that, especially because we don't even know, like, Omarion Hampton hasn't practiced yet to this point of the week. So we don't know if like that foot and ankle is still bothering him. I mean, clearly is, but like if it's going to impact his availability in this game. You brought up Milton Williams coming back, Spillane coming back. The one wild card in this game, though, I think that makes this more of a lean to the Patriots outside of all variably say is like they've found a running game the back half of the year.
Absolutely.
Like they're no longer reliant on Drake May hitting all these explosives. Like remember they played a game like early in the season against the Browns, and the Browns like were in the game throughout the half because like the Patriots couldn't run the football. They were trying to like, and then Drake May starts just bombs away, and they're like hitting all these big plays. But to close the year over the past 9 games, literally the back half of the year, they are 9th. They're running backs only, removing the Drake May runs. They're 9th in success rate. They lead the NFL in yards per carry, and they're 5th in rate of runs of 10 or more yards. Before that, they were 25th in success rate, 26th in yards per carry, 23rd in rate of runs of double digits. And obviously that overlaps Travion Henderson's insertion to a larger role in the offense. But we've also seen the past month, Ramondre Stevenson is still a decent football player. Pretty good even. Like maybe not the great, but like this has turned into like a mini Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery thing, like from a couple years ago. Like you got the explosive back, and you've just got this back that like everyone wished would clear the way for the explosive back, but like it's still good enough in his own right. And because the Patriots now have found this run game, they have now offensive balance. And that, I think, changes the dynamic and the story for the Patriots a little bit. That where, if like, I think if this game would have happened in like week 9, I would have had a lot more confidence in the Chargers being like outright pulling the upset. And they still can pull off this upset if the defense is good enough. Absolutely. But because the Patriots are now more balanced offense, I actually have more confidence in them now in this spot.
Yeah, I actually have. I'm worried about how much confidence I have in the Patriots because I do think, like, if the Chargers were healthy on the offensive line, I think this would be an outstanding matchup. But they're not, and so that's ultimately where we're coming in. And I do worry. I have a little bit too much confidence in a young quarterback. Although we have to say that young quarterback is a rightful MVP candidate. And if we didn't give career achievement awards, which by the way, I don't even think that I'm against giving career achievement awards. Like if Matthew Stafford is kind of close to Drake May and he's had a great career and we want to get him one because he's a guy that people like, that's fun. There are dumber reasons people have gotten MVP awards, right? Than that.
I mean, listen, awards in any capacity, it'd be football, Oscars, and like people love to argue about this stuff and generally don't care. Like no one like thinks about it afterwards.
Exactly. I'm fine. I'm fine with it. Like I'm fine either way with that one. But
whoever they hand the MVP award to is not going to impact me in any capacity outside of anyone that had futures on the bets.
That's correct. But that is probably why, if we're being honest, why the vitriol. There was a year, I guess it was 2 years ago, where I had Sean McVay.
Yes,
they
I
really
that.
surprised as coach of the year, and I went on a tirade about why he should have been coach of the year. But I do still believe, but I had him plus 5,000, didn't win it. I still believe he should have won it. The one guy who won coach of the year is now fired. Is that true? Is that the Kevin Stefanski year?
Anyway. Isn't everyone that wins coach of the year get fired? Isn't like it's because coach of the year is basically turned into like we thought you'd suck, you didn't, therefore you did an amazing job. And usually it's usually a high oscillation team that like went from, and then that stuff kind of swings back. And then you're like, oh, and then these guys are out of jobs or they're on to the next job.
Yeah, no, Dan Quinn and what's going on there. I like Dan Quinn though, so let's hope they find an offensive coach and everything gets turned around. We'll get it. Same question for the Sunday slate. We didn't talk about the Chargers and Patriots pass catchers. It's the exact same conversation you've had about all the other pass catchers, except maybe Stephon Diggs get some run out, but everything about those guys over in the worksheets at Sharp Football Analysis. So go and read over there. Also remember that, you can get it for just $19.99 this week, and our betting recommendations, everything at sharp.football. So go and check that out. But same question here for the Sunday slate as I had before, just general overall thoughts on these 3 games as you're looking to build DFS lineups.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's really hard. Like any type of these situations where you're going to have Josh Allen in a spot where he might have to be pushed into like put the cape on early. So I think even Josh Allen is one of these guys. Like on the Sunday side, I might just play 100% Josh Allen. Like just play 100% Josh Allen. Not even get cute with any other quarterbacks. And then maybe 100% Saquon Barkley. I want to be light on the 49ers guys. Especially Christian McCaffrey, who's always high owned on every slate he's on. So that's, I think, the way I'm going to play it is on that. And then maybe mix in a Patriots running back into those lineups.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm feeling the same way about that, especially on the 49ers side, and maybe 0 Christian McCaffrey. I don't know. that might be where we are. All right.
Yeah, if you're like a single entry to 3 max, I think you just fade CMC altogether. If you're a 150 gamer, like obviously you're gonna mix in CMC and guys like James Cook. But I think if you're a 1 to 3 max player, those are guys maybe you gotta fade.
You got to take a stand somewhere.
Yep.
You got to take a stand somewhere. All right, one more game we have here. I do want to remind you, though, that we're going to keep podcasts going throughout the rest of the season. Warren will be back on Friday with his podcast with Rich, with Ryan McChrystal, with Joe Gibbs. All of that going to be available on the podcast feed. So make sure you subscribe wherever you find us. Set it up for automatic downloads. We really appreciate that. One more game here. We don't have a lot of time to talk about this game, but I think that's fine because I don't think either you or I want to talk that much about this game. And that's the Texans at the Steelers, 39.5 point total. Texans 3-point favorites here. I still like the Texans here, and I get why they're favored on the road. I think the Texans are the better team in this situation, but this also feels like the perfect matchup for the Steelers. Of all the matchups they could have drawn, if they were looking for a team that they could keep it close with into the fourth quarter and do their Mike Tomlin Steelers voodoo on, the Texans feel like the perfect, maybe the Chargers would have been the other one, but the Texans feel like that the perfect option for them to have in this matchup.
Yeah, I was thinking about this matchup similar to the Chargers matchup, which was in LA, which actually I think it was more like a Steelers home game anyways. But this is the perfect team for the Steelers to kind of just get in the mud, right? With like this wrestle with, like this is definitely gonna be a fist fight. Both these offenses are in the back half of the league, in success rate. I mean, they both are at the bottom of the league, in rate of like facing third downs. The Steelers they're basically boomer bust on offense. Both these teams rely on turnovers a lot. I say when you remove turnovers, though, Houston's defense still stands out to a greater degree than Pittsburgh. They're more of a high variance defense, as we saw again on Sunday night, right? Like this team has like pretty good top-down metrics against the pass and stuff, but then they'll just blow plays. That's why on Sunday through Monday slates, I do want to leave a spot for Nico Collins and maybe Dalton Schultz because of the state of this tight end slate in general. Outside of the Bills tight ends, I'm probably most confident in him versus all the other tight ends. But in like the showdown only slate, like this is a nightmare spot. This game feels really ugly. I don't think either running games are going to get going. Kenneth Gainwell's in a really good spot to catch a bunch of passes, but it feels like just.
But are you worried about his role with DK Metcalf coming back? Right? Like, are we still going to get like that many targets for him if we get Metcalf in there? Which I think is a fair question.
Yeah, and I still think that the way we saw DK Metcalf be utilized this year probably still means. I think when you look at where DK Metcalf aligns in this matchup is not good. Yeah. We haven't seen him like consistently be like a guy that gives like a week to week target earner anyways in this offense. And then when you talk about this matchup, Rodgers, the one thing we know, dude, Rodgers, he has no interest in getting tackled at this point in his career. Like if you watch, even his own line, he got mad at one of his own linemen after celebrating for touching him at one point this year. If you remember that, like this game, like Rodgers is getting the football out of his hand. First of all, he has the quickest time to throw already. 56% of his throws have come within 2.5 seconds of snap. It's highest rate in the league. Going against one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. We've like seen this against the Browns twice. Like, dude, he is just getting rid of the football. And to be fair, Houston's still really good, but on some of these quick passes, they at least are a little more vulnerable. Like they're 13th in yards per pass attempt, right? Like compared to 4th, 9th in completion rate compared to 3rd. So like they're still really good, but that's where I think these are the Kenneth Gainwell targets. Yeah, like they're all going to be hit with him. So I will say
perhaps Pat Freiermuth, because we are getting at least more Pat Freiermuth than we were with Washington, because they need somebody to block. Johnny Smith certainly isn't going to be that guy, which just means we get more there with Freiermuth. Do we get him in the end zone? Freiermuth is at least live, I would say, if you're playing the Sunday, Monday slate, where I don't think you would have said that about any Steelers tight end before the Washington injury, except on those games we knew that Washington was going to play, 70% of snaps or whatever.
Yeah, I can see that too. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones like, yeah, Freiermuth Gainwell would be kind of more, I'd be a lot more interested in him against DK Metcalf, because we're getting Lassiter back. Obviously, Stingley's been awesome. The Houston's just been so good on the outside. They just don't give up a lot of explosives either. So it's
unless your name is Alex Pierce.
Yeah. Unless you're Alex Pierce running against the backups, you can do it.
All right. Well, that's it. That's it for us. That's all the games. Like I said, There's way more on every game available at sharpfootballanalysis.com in those worksheets. Make sure you go read them. Get ready for this week. Lots of little nuggets in there about DFS for betting on props. Speaking of betting on props, we will have a lot of prop releases ourselves this week, as well as sides and totals. Those, you can get all of those for our wild card weekend, the worksheets, plus those betting recommendations for $19.99. Head over to sharp.football. Check that out. Subscribe wherever you find us. And Rich and I will be back to talk with you next week.